The autumn of 2009 arrived early in Vermont that year. By late September, the maple trees along Route 7 had already turned brilliant shades of crimson and gold, carpeting the mountain roads in a patchwork of fallen leaves. 3 university students from Burlington, 22-year-old Kevin Hartley, his girlfriend Emma Rodriguez, and their friend Marcus Webb, set out on what was supposed to be a weekend camping trip to the Green Mountains. They never came home. Kevin had borrowed his older brother's silver Honda CR-V for the trip, packing it with tents, sleeping bags, and enough supplies for 3 days in the wilderness. Emma, an environmental science major, had been planning this excursion for weeks, eager to collect soil samples from the higher elevations for her senior thesis. Marcus, the most experienced hiker of the group, had mapped out a trail that would take them through some of the most remote sections of the Green Mountain National Forest. On Friday afternoon, September 25th, they stopped at a gas station in Middlebury, where surveillance footage showed them laughing and loading up on snacks. That was the last confirmed sighting. If you're watching from somewhere in the world right now, we'd love to hear from you. Drop a comment below telling us where you're tuning in from. And don't forget to subscribe to stay updated on stories like this one. When Kevin, Emma, and Marcus didn't return by Monday evening, their families grew concerned. By Tuesday morning, Kevin's mother had filed a missing persons report with the Vermont State Police. Search and rescue teams scoured the Green Mountains for weeks, focusing on the areas Marcus had mentioned to his roommate before leaving. Helicopters swept over dense forests. Ground crews hiked every marked trail within a 50-mile radius. Search dogs picked up scattered scents, but nothing concrete. The Honda CR-V was never found. No camping equipment, no bodies, no signs of struggle or accident along the mountain roads. It was as if the 3 students had simply driven into the wilderness and vanished into thin air. For Kevin's parents, David and Patricia Hartley, the not knowing was the hardest part. David, a high school history teacher, spent every weekend for the next year driving through Vermont's back roads, stopping at every small town, every ranger station, every campground, showing photographs to anyone who would look. Patricia kept Emma's bedroom exactly as she'd left it, textbooks stacked on the desk, hiking boots by the door, unable to accept that her son might never walk through their front door again. Emma's mother, Rosa, a nurse at the University of Vermont Medical Center, struggled to maintain her composure during 12-hour shifts while her mind raced through every possible scenario. Had they gotten lost? Had someone hurt them? Were they lying injured somewhere, waiting for help that never came? The questions consumed her until she could barely sleep. Marcus's father, a construction foreman named Gerald Webb, took a different approach. He became obsessed with conspiracy theories, convinced that something sinister had happened to the 3 students. He plastered Burlington with flyers, organized volunteer search parties, and pressured local law enforcement to treat the case as a potential abduction rather than a hiking accident. The Vermont State Police investigated every lead. They interviewed dozens of classmates, professors, and local residents. They examined the students' phone records, bank statements, and social media accounts. Nothing suggested they'd planned to disappear. Kevin had a job interview scheduled for the following Wednesday. Emma had promised her younger sister she'd help with college applications over fall break. Marcus had concert tickets for a show in Boston the next month. As months turned into years, media attention faded. The case grew cold. The families held memorial services, though they couldn't bring themselves to use the word funeral. Some days, Patricia Hartley would convince herself she'd glimpsed Kevin in a crowd, only to have her heart shatter when a stranger's face turned toward her. Rosa Rodriguez joined a support group for families of missing persons, finding solace in others who understood the peculiar grief of ambiguous loss. Detective Linda Chen, who had led the initial investigation, never stopped thinking about the case. Even after she retired from the Vermont State Police in 2018, she kept copies of all the files in her home office. She'd review them periodically, hoping some overlooked detail might suddenly make sense, but the trail had gone completely cold. By 2023, 14 years after the disappearance, most people in Burlington had forgotten about Kevin, Emma, and Marcus. Their case had become another tragic unsolved mystery, filed away in the basement archives of the police department. The families had learned to live with the pain, though it never truly subsided. David Hartley had aged 20 years in 14. Rosa Rodriguez had developed chronic anxiety that required medication. Gerald Webb had become a shadow of his former self, withdrawn and bitter. Then, on a sweltering July afternoon in 2023, everything changed. A young couple from New Hampshire, Tyler and Jess Bennett, were exploring an abandoned logging road deep in the Green Mountain National Forest, about 40 miles northeast of where the students were believed to have been hiking. They were geocaching, following GPS coordinates to hidden containers, when Tyler noticed something unusual, partially buried under years of accumulated forest debris and undergrowth. At first, he thought it was just a moss-covered rock. But as he brushed away the decomposed leaves and dirt, he realized he was looking at the corner of a vehicle. His heart began to pound. "Jess, come here," he called out, his voice tight. "I think I found something." Together, they cleared away more debris. Beneath nearly 15 years of nature reclaiming the forest, they uncovered a silver Honda CR-V. The vehicle was extensively damaged, as though it had crashed or rolled. The windows were shattered, the hood crumpled, and the entire frame tilted at an odd angle, wedged between two large trees. Vines had grown through the broken windows and wrapped around the steering wheel. Tyler immediately called 911. Within hours, the remote section of forest was swarming with Vermont State Police, forensic investigators, and cadaver dogs. The license plate matched Kevin Hartley's brother's vehicle. Inside the mangled car, investigators found 3 sets of skeletal remains in the front and back seats, still wearing decayed clothing and hiking boots. The scene was haunting and somber. After 14 years of questions, 3 families were about to get answers, though not the ones they'd hoped for. But what captured everyone's attention was what investigators found wedged beneath the passenger seat. A severely damaged laptop computer in a waterproof case. Despite being exposed to the elements for over a decade, the protective case had done its job. When forensic technicians carefully extracted the device and brought it back to the lab, they discovered that the hard drive, though corroded, was potentially recoverable. Detective Raymond Torres, who had taken over cold cases in the Vermont State Police, personally oversaw the laptop's analysis. Digital forensic specialists worked for weeks to extract data from the damaged drive. The process was painstaking and delicate. They couldn't risk destroying what might be the only record of what had happened to Kevin, Emma, and Marcus. When they finally succeeded in recovering files from the laptop, which had belonged to Emma, they found something extraordinary. Emma had been documenting their trip meticulously. There were photographs, journal entries, and most significantly, a detailed GPS log that she'd been keeping as part of her research methodology. The timestamp on the final entry was September 26, 2009, at 3:47 p.m. The recovered data painted a picture of the students' final hours that no one had anticipated. According to Emma's notes and photographs, the 3 had followed Marcus's planned route on Friday evening, setting up camp at a designated site near Camel's Hump. Saturday morning, they'd hiked to several locations where Emma collected her soil samples. Everything seemed normal. The photos showed them smiling, eating trail mix, taking in the spectacular mountain views. But on Saturday afternoon, according to Emma's GPS log, they'd made an unexpected detour. Instead of following the marked trails back toward their vehicle, they'd driven deeper into the forest, following what appeared to be an old, unmaintained logging road. Emma's journal entry, typed during a rest stop, explained why. Marcus had spotted what he believed were Native American petroglyphs on a rock formation about 10 miles off their planned route. He'd wanted to photograph them for an anthropology class project. "Marcus is so excited," Emma had written. "He thinks this could be significant for his semester project. The road is pretty rough, but Kevin's confident the CRV can handle it. Could be back to Main Road by evening." That was the last journal entry. The GPS data, however, continued for several more hours. It showed the vehicle traveling deeper into increasingly remote terrain, along a network of abandoned logging roads that hadn't appeared on any of their maps. The roads had likely been created decades earlier and were now barely passable, reclaimed by the forest. At 3:47 p.m., the GPS log showed the vehicle had been traveling at approximately 25 miles per hour when movement abruptly stopped. The final coordinate placed them at the exact location where Tyler and Jess had discovered the wreckage. Investigators reconstructed what had happened based on the crash site evidence and the recovered data. The old logging road had severely deteriorated over the years. At some point, a section of it had been washed out by erosion, creating a steep drop-off hidden by overgrown vegetation. Kevin, driving in an unfamiliar area with poor visibility due to the dense tree canopy, hadn't seen the drop until it was too late. The CRV had plunged approximately 30 feet down a heavily wooded embankment, crashing through trees and thick undergrowth before coming to rest in a ravine. The impact had been catastrophic. Forensic analysis indicated all 3 students had died instantly or shortly after the crash from traumatic injuries. But the most heartbreaking detail was how close they'd been to the main road, and yet how impossible to find. The crash site was located in a section of forest so dense and remote that it wasn't visible from any established trail or road. The abandoned logging road they'd been following had long since been removed from maps and GPS databases. No search teams in 2009 had any reason to look in that area because it was miles away from Marcus's planned hiking route. The recovery team spent days extracting the remains and evidence from the ravine. It was difficult, emotional work. Many of the investigators and emergency responders had been involved in the original search 14 years earlier. Some wept openly as they worked. Detective Torres personally visited each family to deliver the news. David and Patricia Hartley held each other in their living room, finally crying tears they'd held back for 14 years. Patricia touched the photograph of Kevin that had sat on their mantel since 2009, a prayer of release and grief mixing on her lips. "At least we know now," David said quietly, his voice breaking. "At least we can bring him home." Rosa Rodriguez collapsed when Torres told her about Emma. A neighbor had to be called to help her to bed. But in the following days, she said something that resonated with all the families. "For 14 years, I've imagined every horrible possibility. The truth is terrible, but it's not as terrible as not knowing. At least now, Emma can rest." Gerald Webb's reaction surprised everyone. The man who'd spent years consumed by conspiracy theories simply nodded slowly, tears streaming down his weathered face. "He was looking at petroglyphs," he said softly. "That sounds exactly like Marcus. Always curious about everything. Always wanting to learn." The medical examiner confirmed what the crash analysis suggested. All 3 had died in the accident on September 26, 2009. They had not suffered in the wilderness, waiting for rescue that never came. They had not been victims of foul play. It had been a tragic accident in a remote location that no one had thought to search. The recovered laptop data also revealed other poignant details. Emma's photo gallery contained hundreds of pictures from that weekend. Candid shots of Kevin and Marcus laughing around the campfire, scenic vistas from their Saturday hike, Emma's carefully documented soil samples. There was a video of Marcus doing a silly dance on a mountain overlook, trying to make Emma laugh while she worked. There was a voice memo of Kevin singing off-key while cooking breakfast, with Emma and Marcus teasing him mercifully. These files gave the family something they'd never had before, a glimpse into their loved ones' final happy moments. There was comfort in knowing that Kevin, Emma, and Marcus had been enjoying themselves, doing what they loved, surrounded by the natural beauty of Vermont's mountains when fate intervened. The funeral services, held in October 2023, brought closure that had been delayed for 14 years. Hundreds attended, including their former classmates, now in their mid-30s with careers and families, who remembered the three students fondly. The University of Vermont held a memorial dedication, planting 3 maple trees on campus in their honor. But perhaps the most moving tribute came from an unexpected source: the geocaching couple, Tyler and Jess Bennett, who'd discovered the crash site, started a scholarship fund at the University of Vermont in memory of Kevin, Emma, and Marcus. The fund supports students studying environmental science and anthropology, Emma's and Marcus's respective fields. Kevin, who'd been a business major planning to open an outdoor recreation company, was honored through a partnership with local conservation groups that maintain Vermont's hiking trails. If we hadn't been out there that day, following those GPS coordinates for a hobby, Tyler said at the scholarship announcement, they might never have been found. We like to think Kevin, Emma, and Marcus led us there somehow. The least we can do is make sure their passions live on through other students. Detective Torres, meanwhile, used the case to advocate for better tracking systems for hikers and improved mapping of remote forest roads. He worked with state officials to update GPS databases to include and flag dangerous or abandoned routes. We can't bring these 3 young people back, he told a state legislative committee, but we can potentially prevent similar tragedies. Emma's mother, Rosa, found an unexpected calling in the aftermath. She began volunteering with the National Missing Persons Network, using her experience to help other families navigate the nightmare of having a loved one disappear. She became particularly passionate about advocating for improved search technologies and better coordination between agencies during missing persons investigations. For 14 years, I lived in limbo, she told a support group. Every day was the same question: is Emma alive? Where is she? Is she hurt? Is she scared? Finally knowing the truth, as painful as it is, allowed me to begin healing. I want to help other families find their answers sooner, whether those answers bring joy or grief. The not knowing is its own special kind of torture. Patricia Hartley took the photographs and videos recovered from Emma's laptop and created a memorial website for all 3 students. The site featured their final happy moments, along with stories and memories from friends and family. It became a place where classmates could share their own photos and recollections, building a digital memorial that captured who Kevin, Emma, and Marcus had been as people, not just as victims of tragedy. David Hartley returned to teaching, but incorporated his son's story into lessons about how quickly life can change and the importance of treasuring every moment with loved ones. Kevin was supposed to have that job interview on Wednesday, he'd tell his students. He had his whole life planned out. But we don't get guarantees. We get today. That's why it's so important to tell the people you love that you love them. Gerald Webb, Marcus's father, underwent the most dramatic transformation. The bitterness that had consumed him for years gradually melted away, replaced by bittersweet peace. He visited the crash site, now marked with a small memorial plaque, and spent hours there talking to his son. He started attending therapy and eventually rejoined his construction crew, finding purpose in work again. The petroglyphs that Marcus had been so eager to photograph were eventually located by a team of archaeologists and anthropologists from the University of Vermont. They discovered that Marcus had been right. The rock formations did contain authentic Native American carvings, likely created by the Abenaki people hundreds of years ago. The site has since been documented and protected as a cultural heritage location. In a fitting tribute, the university's anthropology department named the site Webb's Discovery in Marcus's honor. A photograph of Marcus taken from Emma's recovered files and showing him grinning excitedly at the camera with mountains in the background hangs in the anthropology building, along with information about the petroglyphs. The case sparked renewed interest in cold missing persons cases throughout Vermont and neighboring states. Several other families reached out to Detective Torres, hoping that improved technology and fresh perspectives might help solve their own mysteries. Torres formed a specialized cold case unit focused specifically on missing persons, using the lessons learned from Kevin, Emma, and Marcus's case. One particularly significant outcome was the implementation of what became known as Emma's Protocol, a system requiring hikers to register detailed GPS routes with park services when entering remote areas, along with emergency check-in procedures. While voluntary, the protocol has been credited with several successful rescues of hikers who became lost or injured in Vermont's wilderness. The recovered laptop became something of a symbol within the digital forensics community. The specialists who'd extracted the data presented their findings at national conferences, highlighting both the importance of waterproof protection for digital devices and the remarkable durability of modern hard drives. Emma's foresight in using a protective case for her laptop during the camping trip had, ironically, provided the key to solving the mystery of what happened to her and her friends. As the one-year anniversary of the discovery approached in July 2024, the three families gathered at the crash site for a private ceremony. They'd decided together to leave the memorial plaque, but otherwise allow nature to reclaim the spot. It seemed fitting that the forest would embrace the location where their loved ones had taken their final breaths. Standing in that remote ravine, surrounded by the same trees and wilderness that had hidden the truth for so long, Rosa Rodriguez spoke words that resonated with everyone present. My daughter loved these mountains. She loved studying the earth and understanding how nature works. There's something poetic about the fact that she came to rest here, in the place she loved. It took 14 years, but the forest finally told us where to find her. I'm grateful for that. The three families maintained close bonds that had been forged through shared tragedy and eventual shared closure. They gathered regularly for dinners and holidays, supporting each other through the ongoing process of healing. They established an annual camping trip, carefully planned and well documented, to honor Kevin, Emma, and Marcus's memory, choosing accessible, well-maintained trails where they'd hike together and share stories about the three young people who'd had their lives cut short. Detective Linda Chen, the original investigator who'd never stopped thinking about the case, was invited to the memorial gathering. Now in her 70s, she walked slowly to the plaque and placed her hand on it. "I searched for you," she whispered. "I never stopped looking. I'm so sorry it took so long." Patricia Hartley embraced the elderly detective, both women crying. "You cared," Patricia said. "Even all these years later, you still cared. That means more than you know." The case also prompted changes in how abandoned logging roads are managed throughout Vermont's national forests. State and federal agencies partnered to create comprehensive maps of old routes, marking those that were dangerous or impassable. Warning signs were posted at the entrances to unmaintained roads, and some particularly hazardous routes were physically blocked to prevent vehicles from accessing them. Local hiking clubs adopted sections of the Green Mountain National Forest, conducting regular safety assessments and trail maintenance. They created updated, detailed maps that included not just established hiking trails, but also notes about areas to avoid and potential hazards. These maps were made freely available online and at all park ranger stations. Kevin's brother, who'd lent him the CR-V for that fateful trip, struggled with intense guilt for years. "If I hadn't let him take the car," he'd say. Maybe they would have stayed closer to campus. Maybe they'd still be alive. But through family therapy and support from David and Patricia, he gradually came to accept that the accident wasn't his fault. It had been an unforeseeable tragedy, born of curiosity, adventure, and terrible luck. He eventually named his own son Kevin, ensuring that his brother's name and spirit would live on in the next generation. When little Kevin was old enough to understand, his father told him stories about the uncle he'd never meet, about his kindness, his sense of humor, his love of the outdoors, and his excitement about the future that had been stolen from him. Emma's younger sister, who'd been 14 when Emma disappeared, graduated from college with a degree in journalism. She wrote her senior thesis about missing persons cases and the families left behind, using her own experience to inform her research. She went on to become a reporter specializing in cold cases, using her platform to keep unsolved mysteries in the public eye and to advocate for families still searching for answers. Emma wanted to be a scientist, to understand the Earth and help protect it, she said in an interview. I can't continue her specific dream, but I can honor her memory by helping other families find the truth about their missing loved ones. Every person who disappears leaves behind people who need answers. I know what that need feels like. Marcus's younger cousins, inspired by his story and his passion for anthropology, organized annual youth hiking and education programs through their local community center. They'd take groups of teenagers into the Vermont wilderness, always on well-marked, safe trails, teaching them about nature, Native American history, and outdoor safety. They called the program Webb's Wanderers and made it their mission to inspire the same love of learning and exploration that had driven Marcus, while emphasizing the importance of preparation and caution. The case also attracted the attention of several documentary filmmakers and podcasters who wanted to tell the story. The families carefully considered these requests, ultimately agreeing to participate in a single, respectful documentary that focused not on sensationalizing the tragedy, but on celebrating Kevin, Emma, and Marcus's lives, and on the importance of never giving up hope in missing persons cases. The documentary, which aired in early 2025, featured extensive interviews with the families, investigators, and the couple who discovered the crash site. It included the recovered photographs and videos from Emma's laptop, showing viewers the three students as they'd been in their final happy hours, young, vibrant, full of life and laughter. The film ended with the establishment of the Scholarship Fund and the various safety improvements that had been implemented as a result of the case. Viewers around the world were moved by the story. The documentary sparked conversations about hiking safety, the importance of proper trip planning, and the need for improved search and rescue technologies. It also highlighted the often overlooked emotional toll on families of missing persons and the resources available to help them cope. For David and Patricia Hartley, watching their son's face on screen, seeing him laugh and joke around with his friends in those recovered videos, was both agonizing and healing. It reminded us of who he was, David said after the documentary premiered. For so many years, when we thought of Kevin, we could only think of the question mark. We could only think of him as missing. But seeing those videos reminded us that before he was a missing person, he was our joyful, adventurous, loving son. That's how we choose to remember him now. The three families also worked with the University of Vermont to create a permanent memorial on campus, a stone bench positioned on a hill overlooking the Green Mountains, with plaques honoring Kevin, Emma, and Marcus. The inscription reads, "They sought knowledge, adventure, and beauty in these mountains. May their spirit of curiosity and friendship inspire all who rest here." The bench quickly became a popular spot for students to study, reflect, and appreciate the mountain views. Many students who never knew the three personally found themselves drawn to the memorial, leaving flowers or notes of encouragement during difficult times. The bench became a symbol of resilience, remembrance, and the enduring impact that even a brief life can have on others. As the years continued to pass, the intensity of grief gradually softened for the families, though the loss never truly disappeared. Rosa Rodriguez described it as learning to carry the weight differently. The pain doesn't go away, but you become stronger. You build your life around it. Some days are harder than others, but you keep going because that's what Emma would want. That's what all of them would want. The case of Kevin Hartley, Emma Rodriguez, and Marcus Webb ultimately became more than just a story of three missing students found 14 years later. It became a testament to the power of persistence, the importance of closure, and the ways that tragedy can inspire positive change. The laptop that Emma had carefully protected in a waterproof case had done more than solve a mystery. It had given three families the gift of knowing, had prompted safety improvements that would protect future hikers, and had ensured that three young lives cut short would be remembered not just for how they died, but for how they lived. In a forest clearing 40 miles northeast of Burlington, Vermont, nature continues its endless cycle. Leaves fall and decompose. Snow blankets the ground in winter, wildflowers bloom in spring. And three maple trees, planted by the families of Kevin, Emma, and Marcus, grow taller each year, their roots intertwining beneath the earth, their branches reaching toward the sky above the green mountains where three friends once hiked together, chasing knowledge and adventure on a beautiful September afternoon.